All right, so get ready to dig into some serious local politics because we were diving deep into 3 Seattle City Council meetings from June 2024.
Ooh, June 2024.
Yeah, June 4th, 11th, and 18th to be exact.
Okay.
We got the official minutes right here.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, buried within these pages are stories about power priorities and the people who are shaping Seattle's future.
Right.
You might be surprised by what we uncover.
What's so fascinating about these meetings is that, they're kind of like a window into the real-time decision-making that impacts your daily life,
Totally.
It's one thing to read about policy in the news or whatever, but it's another thing altogether to see how your elected officials are debating these things and compromising and then ultimately shaping the direction of the city.
Yeah, you're right. It's we get to be a fly on the wall
Exactly.
for how the sausage gets made.
Exactly.
Speaking of sausage getting made, let's meet the players here. Okay, so we've got Council President Sarah Nelson. She's leading the charge.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got council members Joy Hollingsworth, Robert Kettle, Kathy Moore, Tammy Morales,
Okay.
Maritza Rivera, Rob Saka, Dan Strauss, and Tanya Wu.
Wow. That's a lot of council members.
It is a lot. It's a full roster.
Yeah.
But these minutes give us a really unique opportunity to see them in action,
Totally.
understand their individual approaches, and then maybe even predict some of their future moves.
And that's what I think is so cool about these kind of on the surface dry meeting minutes.
Yeah.
They're like a treasure trove.
Yeah.
You get in there and you start analyzing the voting patterns.
Oh, yeah.
The amendments that they're proposing, even just the language they use when they're debating. You can start to see these are the values that are important to this council member and these are their priorities.
Totally. Yeah. And you get to see what makes them tick.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's jump right in with a topic that sparks some serious debate.
Uh-huh.
Council Bill 120777.
Okay.
Now, this one focused on unsafe buildings.
Interesting.
Now, on the surface, this might sound kind of mundane.
Right.
But trust me.
Okay.
It gets way deeper than that.
Okay.
Because it gets into this fundamental tension that I think a lot of city governments have to deal with, which is basically how do you balance property rights with public safety?
Yeah. It's a tough one.
It's a tough one for sure.
Yeah.
And we see this tension play out really vividly in the back and forth between these council members.
Okay.
So, for example, Councilmember Morales, she was really concerned about the impact that vacant and potentially dangerous buildings were having on communities.
Sure.
And her amendment really highlighted the very real risks that these buildings pose.
Yeah.
Things like fire hazards, crime, and then just a decline in the quality of life for the residents.
Yeah, she was really bringing it home. This is the human impact of these buildings.
Totally. She really brought the human impact home.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a simple, tear them all down situation.
Of course not.
So Councilmember Kettle in particular, he took, I think, a more nuanced approach.
Okay.
Advocating for some due process for these property owners. So he proposed multiple amendments to this bill.
Okay.
Focusing on things like summary abatement.
And just for our listeners who might not be familiar with that term,
Yeah.
What is summary abatement?
Yeah, so summary abatement is basically a legal term that means that you're going to address dangerous situations really quickly without excessive bureaucratic delays.
Got it.
So it's we're going to cut through the red tape here.
Right.
And we're going to take care of this dangerous situation.
Makes sense.
And then he also pushed for greater collaboration with the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections.
Okay.
Which I think suggests that he wanted a more measured and cooperative approach overall.
Yeah, he was trying to find that balance.
Exactly, yeah. And I thought it was interesting because even with all this back and forth and these very different perspectives, this bill ultimately passed unanimously.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So they were able to find some common ground.
It makes you wonder if it was genuine compromise or if maybe there were some strategic concessions to get this thing over the finish line.
Right, or maybe a little of both.
Maybe a little of column A, a little column B.
Right, because, we only have the minutes here.
Exact.
We don't know all the side conversations that were happening.
They don't have the juicy gossip.
Exactly. We don't have all the good stuff. But it gives us a starting point.
It does give us a starting point for further investigation, if you will.
Exactly. And that's what I love about these deep dives is like, we're not just summarizing events, but we're like analyzing them.
Totally.
What's the story behind the story?
Yes.
What are the motivations?
Totally.
Yeah.
And sometimes the motivations are really surprising.
I bet.
Speaking of surprising, let's talk about Don Lindell's appointment as general manager of Seattle City Light.
Okay.
This happened on June 18th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on paper, this seems like a pretty routine appointment.
Sure.
But there's a little detail in the minutes that caught my eye.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
So Lindell actually addressed the council directly.
Oh, wow.
Which is not typical.
No, that's very unusual for a routine appointment.
Exactly. So it makes you think like,
Like why?
why? Yeah. Was it her vision for the city's energy future?
Right.
Was there like public scrutiny of her qualifications?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know.
Interesting.
But it's these little breadcrumbs that make you want to dig in a little further.
I love it. I'm ready to go down this rabbit hole.
Let's do it. Speaking of hidden agendas, let's talk about that budget amendment.
Okay.
CB 120774 from the June 4th meeting.
All right.
Now, I know budget discussions aren't exactly like a thrill a minute.
Right.
But this one, I think, holds some clues about the council's priorities.
Budgets are so fascinating, though, because, like...
They are.
They seem really dry on their face, but, like, at the end of the day...
Yeah.
It's just a reflection of values. It's like, where's the money going?
Exactly.
What's important to the people who are making those decisions?
It's like, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you care about.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So this particular amendment involved moving some money around between different departments.
Okay.
And it had Councilmember Rivera's fingerprints, like, all over it.
Interesting. Okay.
Specifically, her amendment requesting a report on the Equitable Development Initiative.
Okay.
The EDI.
I see.
What do you make of that?
Well, it seems like kind of a strategic move to me.
Okay, how so?
Because if you're talking about the budget and then you're like, oh, and also, can I get a report on this thing?
Right.
It's a way to kind of like bring that initiative to the forefront.
Totally.
And the EDI, of course, is all about like making sure that development benefits all communities.
Especially communities that have been historically marginalized.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think her request for this report, it suggests that she's like keeping a close eye on this, making sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, it's not just about the numbers. It's about using the budget to like advance a specific agenda. Right. And in this case, it's promoting equitable development.
Exactly. And I think this highlights something really important about how these things work.
What's that?
Which is that, Councilmember Rivera, she's one person.
Right.
She doesn't have the power to just like dictate the entire city budget.
Sure.
But what she can do is use these like amendments and these reports to kind of like nudge things in a certain direction.
It's like a game of chess.
Totally it is.
Right? Where like every move has these consequences.
It's all strategy.
And these ripple effects.
Exactly.
And so by like looking at these moves, we can kind of understand like the motivations, the strategy of the players.
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So shifting gears from the nitty-gritty of budgets to something a bit more visual.
All right.
The June 4th meeting also saw a bunch of reappointments to the Seattle Film Commission.
Oh, cool.
So Lowell Dio, Tom Florino, Kat Ogden, Anthony Tockett.
I know some of those names.
Yeah, these names might ring a bell.
Yeah, they do.
For some of our local film buffs out there.
Yeah, for sure.
But I thought it was interesting that they're all getting reappointed.
Right. So, like, what does that say? I mean...
what does that tell us?
What's the council's vision for, like...
Yeah, what do they want Seattle's film industry to look like? Are they trying to bring in the big budget productions?
Yeah.
Are they trying to nurture local talent? Would you get easier to film here?
Right.
Who knows?
Well, and we could find out if we dig a little deeper.
Exactly.
Do some more investigating.
This is just the starting point.
Exactly. And that's what I love about these deep dives is that we're not just like, here's the information. We're like, come on, everybody. Let's go on an adventure.
Well, it's a quest for knowledge.
It is.
Okay. Yeah. So fast forward to the June 18th meeting.
Okay.
And we've got this fascinating juxtaposition of topics. Police surveillance technology and arts funding.
Oh, wow. Talk about a contrast.
Let's talk about two very different sides of the coin.
That's right.
But I think that's what I find so fascinating about city governments.
Totally.
Is that they have to deal with this like huge range of issues.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
Yeah. And sometimes in the same meeting.
Sometimes in the same afternoon.
It's true.
Right.
Wild.
So this particular meeting, we see this really clearly.
Okay.
We've got Council Bill 120778,
Okay.
which deals with the Seattle Police Department's use of automated license plate readers,
Okay.
ALPRs.
ILPRs.
These are those cameras you see like on the streetlights
Oh, yeah.
or attached to police cars.
Yeah.
They're just constantly scanning license plates.
Constantly watching.
Always watching.
Yeah.
And this has been a controversial topic
Sure.
nationwide.
Yeah.
And we see that controversy kind of play out in these minutes.
Okay. So.
Okay, so back to that June 25th meeting.
Okay.
Remember how we were saying it's like a highlight reel?
Yeah.
They were getting so much done.
That's always interesting to me, though. Like, you look at these agendas and it's like, okay, clearly they thought these things were very important.
Totally.
Because they got them all done in one day.
Yeah, they were like checking boxes left and right.
Yeah. What was the priority?
So they tackled everything from indigenous representation to international relations.
Wow.
To like hammering out agreements with city employees.
The whole gamut.
The whole gamut. It was wild.
Wow.
Let's start with those reappointments to the Indigenous Advisory Council.
Okay.
So he's got Derek Leonard Bellegarde, J.C. S. McCormack, Suzanne Sailtoe, Jeremy Takala, and Luther F. Mills Jr.
Okay. So a lot of familiar faces.
All familiar faces, yeah.
Yeah.
They're all coming back for another term.
So what does that tell you?
That says to me that the council is really valuing what these folks bring to the table.
Right. It's not just like a one and done.
Exactly.
They're like, we want you back.
Yeah, we want that continuity. We need that expertise.
And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
the city has been making a really conscious effort
Yeah.
to try to bring indigenous perspectives into the fold.
Absolutely. And it's not just about like checking a box.
Right.
It's about like actually grappling with these historical injustices.
Exactly. And making sure that like the policies that are being enacted
Yeah.
are actually taking those perspectives into account.
And are those minutes giving us any clues about what this council is working on specifically?
You know, they don't get into the nitty-gritty in the minutes.
Oh,
But I think the fact that like these appointments were made
right.
and nobody really batted an eye, you know, there was no debate, no opposition.
It was unanimous.
It tells me that like this is something that they all agree on.
Okay.
Like this is a priority.
It's about making sure that those voices are heard.
And listen to.
Not just like, oh, yeah, we hear you.
Exactly. It's not enough to just be like, yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
We're listening.
It's like, okay, now we're going to demonstrate that we've heard you
We're going to take action.
by incorporating that feedback into our decision making.
Okay, so from local representation, let's go global.
Okay.
Seattle International Affairs Advisory Board.
Okay.
This meeting saw a bunch of new appointments,
Oh, interesting.
which tells me that they're really kind of thinking about Seattle's role in the world.
Right. Because, I mean, Seattle is a global city.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've got, you know, companies, businesses, all that stuff that are operating on a global scale.
So who are these new folks?
So we've got Mark M. Gantar, Michael A. Harold, Ellie Hees.
Okay, I'm not familiar with those names.
Right. I'm not either, but it seems like a really interesting mix of backgrounds and
Yeah.
expertise.
Like they really did their homework.
It seems, I mean, if you're going to put together an advisory board,
Yeah.
you want people who are going to come at it
From different angles,
from different angles. Exactly.
different perspectives.
Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
Especially when you're talking about international affairs, because
It's complicated.
it's so complicated. There's so many moving parts.
And every decision has these like
Ripple effects.
ripple effects. Exactly. Yeah.
Globally.
Okay, but let's come back down to earth for a second.
Okay.
Because we got to talk about those union agreements.
Right, because those are important too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always the most exciting stuff,
Yeah.
but these agreements are like the foundation.
Totally. It's like you can't have a functioning city
Exactly.
if the people who are doing the work
Right.
aren't taken care of.
Yeah, if the city employees aren't happy, nobody's happy.
Exactly.
And then nobody gets to like enjoy the parks or the libraries.
Right, or turn on their lights.
Or turn on their lights. Which brings us to
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 77.
yes,
Big fans of them.
big fans. Yeah, so this agreement, I mean, obviously it's about money, right? It's about compensation.
Sure.
But it's also about like working conditions.
Absolutely.
The making sure that the people who are like keeping the lights on
Literally
have a voice.
And I think that's something that's easy to forget
Yeah,
when we're talking about these things.
totally.
Is that like these are real people with real lives who are just trying to do their jobs.
And support their families.
Exactly. And it's the city's responsibility to make sure that they can do that.
Okay, so speaking of real people with real needs,
Yes.
that real estate deal for the Human Services Department.
Okay.
Specifically, their Aging and Disability Services Division.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that one.
Yeah, so they're getting a new spot.
A new spot, okay.
It's a lease agreement.
Okay.
And it was approved unanimously.
So again, no controversy there.
No controversy. I think this really just shows that, like...
They know it's important.
They know it's important, yeah.
Taking care of the most vulnerable people in our city.
Yeah. And so as we kind of, like, close the book on these June 2024 City Council meetings...
Yeah.
What's, like, the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think for me, it's just this idea that, like, local government, it's not this abstract thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's made up of people.
Real people.
Real people with, you know, strengths and weaknesses and flaws and all of that.
Totally. And they're making decisions that impact our lives every single day.
Exactly.
Right.
So if you want to, like, make a difference, start paying attention to what's happening at the local level.
I love that.
Get involved.
Get involved. Make your voice heard.
Exactly.
That's all the time we have for today, but I want to know, what are you going to be researching next?
What piqued your interest?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let us know. And until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.